A dark fantastic network presentation. Last scene. A mystery.
He was there again, in the dark, standing still. A cold breeze touching his skin, turning the sweat to ice. A soft glow leavening the darkness, slowly. He tried to turn, move away, but it was no use. Out of nowhere, a heavy fog, and with it, a deathly chill and strange echoes. Then, a figure, all in black, inside the fog, taking shape. It stood still, the hint of a face, graying hair. He knew that man. An image, a memory. The fog fading away, revealing something. A tree, its branches slowly revealing themselves as the fog made way. On a branch, a robin. Then an echo of the bird's song. The fog, fading, letting something through. A hum, a machine, warming up, gaining strength. Its sound shaking the space around him, vibrating the ground under his feet. Something flying in the air, coming for him. The man in the fog moved, his eyes starting to glow, bright yellow in the dark. William opened his mouth to scream as something slammed into his body, shattering him into a million pieces. William woke up with a start. He was leaning against the back of a seat. His neck hurt as he leaned forward. He looked around him. He was still at Tommy's diner. Damn, he must have dozed off after his second cup of tea. Who was he kidding? Tea was soothing. If he'd wanted to stay awake, he should have had a cup of strong, unforgiving coffee. He straightened up, started massaging his left shoulder. The weather had turned colder, and his shoulder was acting up again. He looked around him, embarrassed at having fallen asleep, but no one seemed to have noticed. Then again, it was the middle of the night, and there were only a couple of customers in the place. Nighthawks like him, he guessed. He'd come here to gather his thoughts, and after what had taken place, what Lara had said, boy did he need to think. He knew it was unfair, but for a moment there he had doubted her sanity. Had thought that the stress of Michelle going missing had messed with her mind. But deep down, he didn't believe it or didn't want to believe it. Lara was way stronger than that, and the strongest part of her was her mind. It wouldn't break that easily. So, if she wasn't crazy, what was he supposed to think? What was he supposed to believe? He shook his head, took one last bite of the chocolate pie, then got up. He had a hunch, and he needed to follow it. "You're doing a story for what channel?" the guard asked. "Station 12, William said, conveniently failing to mention that said station was a radio channel, not TV. Mention of TV loosened tongues. "I've already been asked about this so many times. I'm sick to death of the whole thing." "What's your name, sir?" William said. "Dan." "Dan," William said, taking out a $100 bill he couldn't really afford and handing it graciously to the man. "I really need the scoop, so I'd really appreciate your help." Dan looked around him guiltily, then smiled a tense smile and took the money. "All right, I guess telling it one more time won't make a difference. It'll help pass the time." They were standing outside an old warehouse belonging to Harrington and Company, a second-tier soft drinks manufacturer. It was one of the warehouses that had been broken into recently. William had a hunch, a wholly mystifying one, that these recent break-ins were somehow connected to Michelle's case. "You work the night shift?" "6 days a week," Dan said. He was a tall, burly man. Shaved head, rough voice, but a somewhat gentle face. "You were here when it happened?" Dan nodded. "Heard something right over there," he said, then pointed to a poorly lit area a few feet from where they were standing, close to the gates of the warehouse. "Then what?" "I called it in to headquarters, I mean." "You work for Meade and Company Security, right?" William said. "Right? But the nearest office is about an hour away from here, so they asked me to check it out and confirm the presence of an intruder. They didn't want to send someone for nothing." Dan swallowed, seemed reluctant to go on with his story. "So you checked it out?" "Yeah." "What did you find?" "Nothing." "Nothing?" "There was no one there. A few boxes and crates had been moved around, but that was it." "Where was this, exactly?" William said. "At house 312. That's a small storage facility filled mostly with junk and decommissioned wares. Can I see it? William asked and knew he was pushing it. But there was more to this, he was sure. I don't know, man. There's nothing to see, really. It's just an old shack filled with junk. Just a quick look, I promise. So I can add some detail to my story. Dan sighed, unconsciously patting his shirt pocket, the one where he'd put the $100 bill William had generously given him. All right, let's go. Dan opened the door and went in. William followed. Dan flipped a small lever, and a wan, yellowish light from a couple of bulbs hanging from grimy wires lit the place. William looked around him. A dusty floor. Lots of boxes, crates, and more boxes. Most of them looked empty. He walked around, looking this way and that, trying to get the feel of the place. Can you show me the area where you found things out of place? Dan swallowed, didn't move. Dan? To your right, next to that big, brown box with the drawing of a fox on it. William sensed that Dan didn't want to go any deeper inside the place. The man was scared. William nodded, looked at where Dan had pointed. And there it was. The big, brown cardboard box with the drawing of a fox on it. The fox was faded, barely there. William walked a little closer to the scene of the so-called crime. But he was grasping at straws. What was he doing here? It was all so ridiculous. He was desperate. This had nothing to do with Michelle's disappearance. He sighed and was about to turn around when he felt it right under his feet. A vibration. A strange hum. He looked down and saw that he was standing on a dirty piece of tarp. He went down on his knees, grabbed the edge of the tarp. What are you doing? Dan said, a touch of panic in his voice. William ignored him. He pulled the tarp away. Underneath it was a manhole cover, looking shiny and new. What are you doing, man? Dan said, almost shouting now. William turned to him, an innocuous smile on his face. Just following a hunch. Where does this lead to? William said, pointing to the manhole. Don't know, Dan said, and took a couple of steps forward. Only a couple. He was still too scared to come any closer. You need to go now or you'll get me in trouble. Okay. Got it, William said, standing up but staying put. Anything else you want to tell me about what happened here? Dan gazed up at the ceiling. It was an involuntary movement rooted in fear and bad memories. William followed the man's gaze. And just before Dan turned out the lights, William could have sworn he saw dark, reddish markings on the ceiling. They looked like footprints. Johnny was lost. He was somewhere in the old shipping district, the sound of fog horns coming to him from afar like a fading memory from a dream. He stopped walking, leaned on a grimy wall. He was drunk and he hated himself for it. His new suit was ruined. There was a large wine stain on the left pants leg and some kind of greasy sauce on the right. But what a night. And that girl. What was her name again? Cheryl? Sherry? Sheila. A voice said from far away, startling him. He couldn't tell if the voice belonged to a man or a woman. He turned around. No one there. The dark street was empty as far as the eye could see. No. Someone was there. Someone in black. Slow. Coming his way.
This has been Last Scene, a mystery.